happy to be here today and happy to talk to you for a little bit. The reason I'm happy to talk to you, if you can go back to the first slide, please. This isn't so much a session to talk to folks, and it's not really about preventing labor shortages. Really, today is a class reunion. And I love class reunions. I actually didn't get to have my 30th college reunion. They canceled it because you guys might have heard there was some kind of a pandemic. So it's fun to have a class reunion. What I will say is together, you might not realize it, but we all went to the same school. We all went to what I've called COVID business school over the last 3 years. And I learned more as a leader in the last 3 years of working with COVID and the time since then. And that's both in running my organization, but also sitting on a couple of boards. It was funny, there was a time in March of 2020 when I was sitting in my attic office wondering, why am I so stressed? And it's, well, I'm trying to run an organization of 250 people that has a pretty big events business. We had a multi-million-dollar multinational events business. But for fun, I was on a hospital board. That wasn't so much fun anymore. For fun, I was also on the board of Harvard's athletics program, right after we canceled every game for the fall. And then I was on the board of the Harvard Club of Boston, a large function facility. So it wasn't so much fun, but it was an incredible learning experience. And if you remember back to when we were in school together, I want to walk you through our course catalog of what we did then and how it matters now. So now we can go to the next slide. So we're a little cut off on the course catalog, but that's okay. There we go. We had a few different things that we all took together. And all of these things still matter. It started with decision theory. Tough first class, but I only did decision theory 101. And that was, how do you make decisions with imperfect information? When I think back to the decisions that everyone was making in March of 2020, I didn't know what COVID was. I told my first communication to my company was, we might be home for as long as 2 weeks. I said that on March 16th, 2020. We reopened our office on March 16th of 2022. Technically, I was right. It was, it could be 2 weeks or more. So it just erred on them more. But there was no perfect information. There's still no perfect information. Not just about COVID, but anybody who tells you they know whether or not people are going to come back to the office, who's coming back to the office, what do millennials think, all these different things. We're all just making it up. We haven't been, there's something about an unprecedented situation where we then ask for, well, I understand this is an unprecedented situation, but tell me how it's worked out before. That doesn't really work. So how do you make the call with imperfect information? That's what leaders have to do. The next piece was resource management. Cash was king. The reason that a lot of our clients survived the pandemic is they conserved their resources. They came in with cash reserves. That's still important. That's still a lesson to take away. How do you manage those resources going forward? And it's not just financial capital, but as we'll talk about this morning, it's human capital. Next on the list is communications. We can't communicate enough to folks right now. As people have gotten decentralized, the notion of walking down the hall and seeing what's going on doesn't work anymore. All of a sudden, it takes more to understand what's happening in communication in a two-way street. Explaining why things are happening. People are anxious, not just about their work, they're anxious about all of the things they're hearing outside. There's nothing that I do as a leader that's more important every day than communicating. I spend hours looking at every word of every all-staff communication that I make. I really think about how I'm walking through the office, making sure that one of my habits is always go to the men's room on the other side of the building. That way I walk through the whole office on the way there. I make sure that I do little things to keep communicating because it's never been more important. And creating opportunities to do that using technology, which is the next piece of using technology. We all became experts in Zoom and Teams and WebEx and all of these things. Those are great. They are great enablers. I named my company Virtual in 1999 because we were big believers in telework. We were using this stuff before it was cool. It's also important to use this, know when to use it, and also know what the limitations are. Remember, you can't make eye contact over Zoom. It is not physically possible. And you can't look at the camera and also look at the person's eyes. Eye contact is kind of important in communication. So understand the limits of the technology, understands how you can use it, and make it your friend. The next piece is marketing, spotting your opportunities. There are organizations that did incredibly well over the last few years because they were opportunistic. I had a friend in the restaurant business who immediately pivoted to, I'm going to be the greatest takeout provider you've ever seen. And he wound up having a pretty good year. Things were possible. For us, we pivoted very hard to doing online meetings. I used to do, in 2019, I traveled about 240,000 miles going to client events. We did events, we've done events in about 43 countries. During 2021, we actually booked more business and events than we did in 2019 because we moved hard to online meetings, made sure we understand that they don't have to be awful. People have been interacting with small screens for a pretty long time. You have to understand how to entertain folks on it. It can be done, but it can't be done with just staring at the Brady Bunch Zoom screen and hoping for the best. But there are opportunities out there that organizations had, and that's also important as we look to prevent labor shortages going forward, is talking optimistically about what the opportunities are going forward, that there's still opportunities for organizations. The last two, psychology and physical education, I'll take together. It's managing morale and wellness. That is, in the end, how you keep people around. The first one on managing morale, I will say, again, I looked at that as CEO, that was my job. I had to remember every day, I've got to manage the morale of folks. I've got to continue doing that. I also have to remember that as a leader in my organization, I am the pinnacle of optimism. After me, it goes down. If I'm walking around saying, we're kind of doomed, I'm not sure how this is going to work out, that's just going to go downward from there, and it's going to get to a pretty unhappy place. That's still the case. Just because COVID is, not quite over, but COVID's in a different spot, doesn't mean that that's not our responsibility every day. Doesn't mean that people don't still need it. Doesn't mean that people aren't still wondering what's going on. And lastly, wellness. Thinking about, I recognize in myself that whenever I feel like I don't have time to go for a run, that's when I need to go for a run. The same is true with all of my employees. Whenever they feel that, we don't have time to do that, this is when we have to make sure that they get out. It's why we have unlimited vacation, is to make sure that people can actually escape the place every now and again. It's why we really encourage people to take it. It's why we really encourage people every now and then, you have to get out of there. It's why we do fun things like every now and then bringing Martha in to speak to our group. Because that's something which I tell folks, and every week I make sure that as a company we watch a TED Talk together. Do we have time to do that? Well, I'll tell you, half an hour of time every week. If I kind of multiplied that across the organization, that's probably $600,000 or $800,000 in lost billings spent watching TED Talks. By the same token, people leave that and they're ready to charge through a wall. They're ready to do more. They're ready to work for an extra hour. They're more inspired. So understanding that wellness piece and understanding how that works. In the end, I will say, and we chatted about this a little bit this morning, there's a lot of folks that are saying that everything has changed. I'm one that would say that to some extent nothing has changed. People are still people. People are still social creatures. People still have some of the same needs. People still need to learn. And making sure that you're educating your workforce and helping them develop. If I ask for a show of hands among the parents in here, how many people thought online school went well for your kids and that they learned a lot? I don't think a lot of hands would go up. I came downstairs, my son was a college, he was a high school senior, my youngest, during a full year of remote school. High school senior, got into college early. I would come down every morning and see him in the same pose on the couch with the laptop on his stomach, logging in, and the Xbox controller behind it. His Madden team was unbelievable. He didn't learn much. My middle daughter, I liked even better. My middle daughter learned about 20 minutes into the pandemic that if you change your name to reconnecting ... you can turn your camera off and not attend any class. That was tuition money well spent. But why do we think that it didn't work for kids, but it works for our employees, that our employees are going to learn just fine remotely? They're not. We need to make sure that as leaders, we're mentoring people and developing people. And we've known how that's happened for our whole careers. We still need to lean into that. It's why, again, it's worth the expense to me to fly my whole company in a few times a year to make sure that everyone is together and everyone can look at each other in the eyes. So I'll close, as you remember from our class reunion, with our commencement speaker. On to our next slide. Our commencement speaker, somebody who I love, is Tom Peters. I saw Tom Peters speak when I was probably like 23. It was one of those times, if you've not read his stuff, at the end of the talk, he said, we're all going to come to the stage and take little bits of cyanide, drink this Kool-Aid. Like, let's go, that's awesome, let's go, Tom. I love his stuff, but I love what he said last year, writing about the situation that we're in. And I don't usually do the business karaoke of reading my slides, but we'll read this one. Leader, make no mistake, this is the defining moment of your career. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your neighbors, take care of your workmates. Good luck. Now, as much as I love Tom Peters, I love Bruce Springsteen even more. And I've seen Bruce probably about 75 times live. When he sings 10th Avenue Freeze Out, one of the great songs all about the creation of the E Street Band, there's a point right before he says the big man, the change was made uptown and the big man joined the band, where he stops, the music stops, and he says, now this is the important part. I love that because there aren't that many times in life when somebody stops and tells you this is the important part. Well, Tom Peters just did that. This is the important part. This for us as leaders is the important part. How we're leading our companies now, how we're leading our organizations right now, this is the important part and this is what's going to matter. So, thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Andy. And quite